Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined as ever by Will Schroeder, my friend, partner, and CEO, founder of Startups.com. I will be wearing the gray hat today. We've decided that it was time for a wardrobe change, so I'll be wearing the hat today.
Looking good. I've combed my hair for what is now the fourth time since the beginning of COVID.
Well, and as anybody who's been watching recently knows, I have none, so that wasn't my issue.
Right behind you.
I'm just trying to keep the sun off. So, Will, we've talked about lots of aspects of being a founder and lots of aspects of leadership, but there's one that's fairly specific, and that's around, as we lead, how important is it that we're liked, right, by our staff, by investors, by partners, clients, everybody. There's a whole host of people around us that we can easily piss off. And so how important is it that we're liked? And in your experience, what's the cost when we're not liked? Where does that go south for us?
Well, as someone who has been on both ends of the spectrum, liked and not liked, I know this is going to sound shocking to you, but this is my admission. Believe it or not, Ryan, not everybody has universally loved me.
Wait a minute. You just sent out a company email that said yesterday, after 30 years of being universally loved as a founder and CEO, and I quote,
one of the things I think, I know I screwed up, and I'm sure you probably have similar stories. Early in my career, when I was first getting started, everyone was my age, right? So oddly, it wasn't, I don't want to say this, it wasn't hard to be liked because we were all in the same boat. We were all 22 years old, right?
It was also everybody's first job, so they had nothing to compare it to.
100%, right? And we were basically just college kids that happened to be working together. There was almost like no other commonality. And so at that point, every night after work, we're all heading out to happy hour and, kind of enjoying good times and what have you. And I found that it was easy to build a lot of friendships within the organization when none of us were sober long enough for it to be a challenge. But look, what I didn't understand, I just hadn't been through this long enough. What I didn't understand and what I would come to learn later is that the path of a founder and a leader to some extent is polarizing, right? Just by nature. By nature, it's polarizing. And so even if things are all fantastic and everybody's just in a high five fest in those early years, early days, what have you, it's gonna change. It kind of has to, right? Because
it has to.
Yeah, as things evolve, you get into a lot of shit that not everybody's happy with, right? You lose consensus pretty fast and things start going the wrong direction. And look, even if you do everything right, by virtue of the company, there's still somebody that didn't get the position they thought they were supposed to have, or the company grew so fast and outgrew them, or they didn't get the raise they wanted. There's just so many versions of or opportunities for people to not like you, right?
Yeah. In my case, very similar. Early company, mid college. We weren't even old enough to go to happy hour. I mean, we did on occasion because there were places it was possible. But our thing after work was that we'd flip over as much of the web server as we could afford to without impacting performance, and that became the Counter-Strike server.
Yeah.
And we would run our own local game there, but then we would play against people in other places. And it's a really unfair advantage if you've never done that. When you've got 6 people in a room who can all talk to each other. Playing against people who are spread out all over the globe, it's an unfair advantage. But I also started in the position where most of the people who I hired, the first 7 in particular, were all friends first. Right. These were people who liked me, right? They started by liking me.
That's usually how it starts.
And so I think, right, yeah. I mean, and even with a new hire, I think you sort of get the benefit of the doubt in the beginning, right? But I think because of the fact that, and some of these were longer term friendships, some of these were, people I had known 6-7 years, which at that point was like a third of my life. So it was the change from being liked just as a friend to then having to make some of those hard decisions and see people unhappy with me over something other than not letting them, breach the door first in Counter-Strike. It was tough, right? It was hard. And so I think there's 2 sides of the coin that I want to make sure we cover today in regards to can I lead without being liked? And one of those is it possible and practical to lead people without being liked? And we'll cover this in detail. But also, as the founder, can you do it, right? Do you have the fortitude to be able to make those decisions and say, like, I can lead, and I know that I'm not going to be liked all the time, but I can do it anyways. And I think that's a separate issue, and one that we should probably try to unpack at least a little bit today.
I think this also becomes a distraction. I mean, at some point,
Sure.
you start thinking, well, I don't want to do this. I don't want to make this decision because it'll be unpopular, right? But look, there comes a time, especially if your organization is growing, where you actually have to make fundamentally unpopular decisions for the sake of the business. I'll give you a great example. When you go from 10 people to 20 people to 50 people to 100 people, those are all very consistent milestones, no matter how many businesses I've seen, where things start to shake up. Where the person who was the CFO, because they were the only person that took a finance class in college, isn't really a CFO, right? And so all of a sudden, you're at 50 people and finance matters, right? You have receivables to track, you have payables to track, and that person's way in over their head, right? They're way beyond what they could do in a spreadsheet, let's say. And so now you have to bring in someone to essentially take that job. This happens all the time. Actually, it happens if things are going well. Like, that's the problem.
Right.
This isn't
that's
like
success begets this problem, right? It's a high quality problem in that it comes along with success and growth.
Well, and so what happens is, let's say this person was a friend of yours, somebody that kind of jumped in early, and they were trying to help out. And I don't care if this person's in any department; they could be in sales, marketing, dev, doesn't matter. But the problem's the same. Company quickly outgrows them, and now there's not a role that has a C starting in it for them with their capabilities. And so here's what happens. You're sitting there going, well, boy, she really helped out in the early stages. She was, super capable, helped get us to where we are, but she can't do what we're trying to do anymore. And now I got to bring in someone else, right? And so now I know that if I make this decision, she's going to be pissed. She's going to go to lunch with a lot of other people, and she's going to be talking about how unfair this is. And fundamentally it is, right? It's unfair. She put in the work, and she'd expect, the return, irrespective of whether she was qualified. And this is how it starts. It starts because you're now making an unpopular decision for the right of the business, and now someone's pissed. And when people are going to lunch and they're pissed, they tend to talk about it. They tend to talk about it a lot. And it isn't until the business has kind of built some steam, some headway, until these things really start to add up. And it could be because you're growing, failing, you name it. This is how it all starts. And all of that gets pointed to one person, most likely. Or not one person, I should say one role, which is the C-level suite, right?
Yeah.
Where they're saying management sucks because X. And that just keeps on going. Again, if things are going well, it's because I'm not getting my due. If things are going poorly, it's because things are going poorly. But either way, what I think founders miss is that we're put on this pedestal going into this job. And this pedestal isn't necessarily all people worshiping us. We're put on a pedestal because every decision maps back to us, and whether or not people like it maps back to us.
Yeah, the pedestal doesn't create a hierarchy of liking or of respect even. It's about visibility, right?
Correct.
Essentially all it means is that you're elevated above the crowd to the point where everybody's watching what you do. And okay, most of the decisions do map back to us in some way, shape, or form, but even the ones that are indirectly ours, they're still ours, right? They're like, well, my direct manager didn't do what I wanted to do, but you're the one that hired him, so ultimately it's your fault, right? And to your point, it's really tough, right? Because and it's tough for both the founder and for the person. Let's go back to the example you used where somebody just gets surpassed by the growth of the company, right? That's never how it feels for them, right? It feels for them like they're taking a step back, right? And they feel like, well, I was asked to create this momentum. I was asked to help create this growth. I put in the time, I put in the effort, I did it. And now I'm getting left behind, right? It's like, hey, would you help me push my car so we can get it to start? And then the second the engine revs up, they just drive away. Like, guys, wait, what happened, right? So it's really tough. But again, as the leader, you have to make the decision that leads to the growth. And I don't know that there's really a way to be likable in that situation. I think the best you can do is explain to them how we got there, right? This harkens back to an episode that we did, all of yesterday, I think, where we talked a bit about transparency and kind of helping people to understand how we got to that decision, right? Is it going to make them like you more? No. Is it going to make them talk about you less at lunch? Kind of depends on the food. But at least might change the color of their understanding a bit, right? Might flavor the conversation slightly differently. And it's always important to provide that level of transparency. And if possible, their path forward, right? I think that's the other thing that happens a lot early stage, is that we grow so fast that we don't have time or we don't take the time. Let me say that differently. We have the time. We don't take the time to recontextualize things for people, right? Company just passed you by. We're bringing in so-and-so to replace you. She's going to be your replacement because she already has the skill set required and you were going to have to grow into it, but we don't have time to do that. And here's how you get to fit into that organization, right? And find ways to make them feel as good as possible about it. Not easy, and again, you're probably not going to cross the threshold of likability, at least not at that point, but the door stays open at least.
You said something earlier that I thought was interesting. You said that when you started, you were working with all of your friends. And I think this is something that's vastly overlooked from founders. When we're starting out, we're working with people who we've built relationships with and generally have a lot in the bank with, right?
Yes.
And probably a lot of good stuff, right? Which is why we wanted to bring them along. And so we have a lot in the bank. And when things start to get weird, where they didn't get quite the raise they wanted, or this happens or that happens, initially we have enough to fall back on that it kind of balances out a little, right? But then new people show up. And we don't have anything in the bank with these people, right? They don't care what a good time we had 2 years ago when we went on spring break. They only care exactly the decision you just made today. That is their entire history with us. And then you start to compound that. You add more and more and more people that don't have anything in the bank, and all they see are the answer of no. And that does not lead to likability. And our job has a lot of no attached to it. Right?
It sure does.
And that's the part I think for founders that we don't quite understand how incessant that is, right? So all the little no's that we don't think much of, right? Like Ryan, you're our CMO, so we talk all the time about, can we raise a marketing budget? And the answer is no a lot, right? I mean, it just like, we're limited at some levels of what we can do on budget. And so the answer is no. Now, I don't think, you're super frustrated, but it's not as cool as yes, right?
Right. No, it doesn't change your likability.
I think it adds up.
Right.
But look,
it does.
It comes with the job. I mean, at its core, it comes with the job. And I don't think folks who are new leaders, or certainly new founders, really get how inherent that is with what we do. We don't get to be Johnny likability all the time. Like, that would be cool, but we have a job where we have to say no all the time. And there's no version where people get told no and race home to their spouse to tell them how awesome that decision was.
Right. Unless the question was, am I being let go?
Yeah, right.
No, right? There's the one exception to this rule that proves it. Yeah, no, it's
so it adds up.
It's not. Yeah, it does. It's compounding, and like you said, over time, right? Particularly, if you started with people that you had a lot in the bank with. Now, my first startup was built on mostly just social friends, right? That was just all I had. I had no career at that point, so I didn't have any career friends or colleagues or people I knew from industry or whatever. Now, second, third, fourth startups, you can start to roll that in, right? You may have different level of sort of banked experiences with people. And the mileage on those varies, right? It's very different than, the kid that you grew up with, that you also had 3 fistfights with, that you got over, like there's that level of friendship. And then we had a professional relationship. You bring a lot to the table. I want you to join my startup. Again, you're starting with something in the bank. I don't want to belabor this point, but I think that one of the things to keep in mind as time goes on and you do start to add people in whom which you have nothing in the bank with, the way they view your decisions starts to become purely objective and zero subjective. And I think that's the main difference between people that you have something in the bank with and people who you don't, can give you the benefit of the doubt and apply some subjectivity to your decision making and give some color, some flavor behind here's why he had to do that, right? I understand who he is as a human, and I know he made this decision because of this, right? Somebody that you got nothing in the bank with, pure objective, right? It's binary. I wanted yes, I got no. I'm going to go home and slag him off to my spouse, right? That's all I can do.
But actually think about every no as another seed, right? Initially, when you're getting started and you're bringing everybody on, there's not a lot of no. It's yes, you can join. Yes, we can do this. Yes, it's yes, everything. But then people get, locked into their position and, you're sitting on a whiteboard and you're not necessarily agreeing with everything they have to say, right? So that starts to bubble up. Or, we keep talking about HR related stuff, but I think that's a powerful component, but that's only a component, right? And it's often not as frequent. It's not until you start to get all of these little seeds of no where that shit starts to bubble up, right?
Yeah.
And now people are at lunch and they're like, hey, you know what? Wil and Ryan said this one thing that's kind of fucked up, right? And then the next person chimes in, yeah, I felt the same way. And this is how it starts, right? It's a whole bunch of, I don't care if it's a Slack chat, a lunch chat, a happy hour chat. It's a whole bunch of chats that, by the way, don't involve you. Right?
Yep. And you will never know. Right?
Where your cool boss persona gets chipped away at. And I used to think, and Ryan, we were kind of talking about this earlier. I used to think that I'm going to be cool boss, right? I'm going to be hanging out with, all my friends. I'm going to, buy rounds of drinks at happy hour. It's a high five fest, company's growing. Everything's awesome, right? And then all of a sudden, I stopped getting invited to happy hour. Then I stopped getting invited to lunch, which, by the way, if you're buying lunch and you're not getting invited, that says it all.
Good chance you're fairly low on the likability index at that point.
And look, this is a rite of passage. Employees, team members go to lunch to bitch about their bosses, and bosses go to lunch to bitch about their employees. It's kind of that simple, right?
We don't really need to eat that meal. It's completely unnecessary.
Right. But until enough of those events have happened, right, until this thing starts to kind of snowball, you don't see it yet. Again, at first, you're Mr. Popularity. It's not until these things start to compound, and it's actually a factor of time typically, until you start to realize that I'm going to make a lot of unpopular decisions. I'm going to try to make good decisions. I'm going to try to make people happy, but I'm going to make a lot of unpopular decisions. And over time, each of those seeds are going to get planted, and they're going to grow in every one of those lunches, Slack chats, etc. And over time, my popularity score is going to continue to trend down. Right? My polls are going to trend down. But here's the thing. The question, and this thing is at the top of the episode. At what point does my likability still matter? And at what point do I start to get to a point where actually it does matter?
Before we jump to that, I want to talk about time in a slightly different way, and tie it back. You said you used two words in that last bit, which was time and growth, right? And I think that one of the things that starts to change about the decisions that we make are that people feel like we have more ability to say yes over time. That's the perception, right? Early on, when somebody's like, hey, can we order a pizza for everybody tonight? And you're like, we have zeros of dollars, no clients, and a bunch of payables, right? So they get it, right? The minute the company starts to look like it's doing well, right? All of a sudden, the expectation that you can start to say yes changes. As the company grows, the expectation that not only you can say yes, but that you should, because I was part of that. Going back to what we said before, we asked everybody to contribute to all of this stuff, and they did. And now we've grown beyond them, or we've just grown to a point where they feel like they could say yes. It might be a full replacement, might just be something that they want that we can't give them at that time. Could be a tool, could be a subordinate, could be another teammate, could be so many things, right? And I remember early on in that, well, not too early on, about a year into that business, at one point, selectively opening up the books to somebody who didn't have a reason to see the books, other than they were incessantly bothering me with a question that required finances that we just simply didn't have. What they saw were booking new clients, money coming in.
Everybody assumes you have more money than you do.
Everybody assumes we have more money than we did. And so then I showed them. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to open up everything to you, but here's our checking balance right now. Would you still like that thing that you want that's going to cost 3 times what we have in our checking right now and bankrupt us so that you can have that thing that you wanted? And that changed the conversation very well. Now, did it make him like me anymore? No. But it gave him that context around why. And this is really less about how this impacts likability, more just about how those decisions start to become more necessary, and the expectations start to shift. Again, this goes back to some of that objectivity versus subjectivity. They were looking at it subjectively and saying, hey, the company's growing, therefore you should be able to do this thing. Well, objectively, we just couldn't, right? Okay, I surrender my soapbox.
But what about when decisions don't map back to you, right? In other words, you have 2 people in a department that just don't agree, right? So they've created the problem, right? But again, this is where the multiplicity comes in. The more people that get added, the more things that can go wrong that end up, the blame shifts to you. So you got 2 people, you got 2 developers, and they both have a different direction in which they want to take the technology, right? And maybe you both have their own merits, but it maps back to you to choose one. Now, you didn't create this problem, right? This isn't something where you're like, I don't have enough money in the bank, but ultimately you have to pick a side. In the moment you do, again, whoever you didn't pick is running home saying, go fuck him, right? And again, this is where it starts. As the management of any company, certainly within the founding team, et cetera, you are at the nexus of pissing everyone off. And people don't realize that, because when you say, hey, I can't give you the raise, or I can't make this expenditure, they forget that they're just thinking it's just you and them. Right?
Yep.
They forget that you had to have this same friggin' conversation with 10 other people today, right? And you pissed all of them off too.
Yep.
At its core, it comes with the job, right? It's kind of what we signed up for. However, if we're early in this job, if we're really early in this job, we just haven't seen it yet. And so we just don't know what's coming. So we're like, I want to be likable, right? I want everybody to like me. And it's like, well, it ain't easy, right?
It's not easy. It's not even necessarily possible. It's also not even necessary, right? I mean, it'd be nice. It'd be a nice to have, but it's definitely not a necessity.
You could maybe not be liked, but you have to be respected. And I think that goes with nearly any job, whether you're the parent or the president of a country. You have to be respected, right? The moment you lose that, you're screwed. And so let's just dig into that a little bit and kind of, where that line is drawn, because there are no lack of leaders who were very unlikable, but kind of got the job done, right? You look at almost every tech leader. People see Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk does so much weird shit, right? But if Tesla's stock is up 10x, everyone's okay with it, right? Try smoking pot on Joe Rogan while your stock is going down 10x and see how people respond to that, right? At the end of the day, he can deal with, people looking at him, oh, okay, that's weird, if he's respected. And the respect comes with the outcomes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In that case, it's right. They can respect the outcomes. The decision making at a personal level was sometimes very, very weird stuff, but the professional decision making they could agree with, right? They could understand. It was contextualized by the results. Pull another example: Steve Jobs, right? Not known as being particularly likable, or even
I think he went out of his way to be unlikable.
Yeah, he was just known for being really, really hard to work with, hard to work for, irrational at times, flying off the handle, temper, you name it, right? Like really bad behaviors. And yet, because of the results that he drove and demanded, and the results that he created, not just for the company, but for the people that worked for him, right? Because there's a lot of those stories too, where it's like, yeah, he was an asshole, and I hated most of the time that I spent working for him, but I learned a ton and I grew as a person. This is not a license to go be an asshole to people under the guise of pushing them and making them better people because you're an asshole of a leader. That's not what I just said, right? We're using these to sort of illustrate a point here. Don't just go be a jerk for the sake of being a jerk because it's like, oh, well, it's a great management philosophy. It's not. It is not. But outcomes can trump behaviors, right? And likability, right? And so especially in the case of Steve Jobs, the things he did with Apple gave him enough respect that his respect carried him through the tide of his shitty behaviors.
Let's investigate and kind of just unpack both ends of that of that process. So on the one end, you have respected but not liked, and on the other end, you have liked but not respected. Right? Both are a problem. So we were just talking about respected, not liked. And you can take it to a certain degree, right? People can respect you, but if they just actually really hate you, then you're only going to be able to have so many wins before you have a palace revolt, right? I mean, if everybody's going home saying like, what a jerk this person is, it does not take very long before you make one slip up, Steve Jobs in the 80s, and you're out of a job, right?
Yeah.
And so to be fair, if you totally overlook the being liked part, if you're kind of just an a-hole, you can only outcome that so long before eventually people are like, actually just don't like you. And at that point, you've got, pitchforks at the drawbridge and people are like, just, we hate you. Right.
Right. Yeah. At some point, I think that the lack of respect or the dislike can grow geometrically, but the outcomes required to overcome that have to grow exponentially, right? You can't be an asshole and be running a mid-sized revenue company that gains and nobody notoriety for having worked there, right? Now, if you're growing Apple and you're creating these crazy life-changing products, outcomes, stock prices through the roof, that exponentiality buys you more geometric asshole tolerance, right? But you can't be an exponential asshole and exponential returns, right? Like one has to really outweigh the other. In this case, to remain positive, those big outcomes have to be there, right? Early on in a startup company, nobody's sticking around if you're an exponential asshole creating geometric outcomes. It just doesn't happen.
Let's move the slider to the other end of that spectrum. You are Johnny Funtimes. Everyone loves you, but you suck at your job, right? People will tolerate, actually, they'll tolerate a lot more of your incompetence if you're also likable until you actually have to map that back to demonstrable results, at which point the likability just doesn't last anymore. I would say this, your job longevity is actually much better as being an asshole who gets shit done.
For sure.
Than being the nicest person in the world that's incompetent.
Well, yeah. I mean, nice doesn't sign paychecks, right? Like it can sign them, but it doesn't necessarily ensure that there's any money behind them. Yeah. So what we're saying is you have to be able to balance the results and the behaviors, right? Like, yeah, you can be the most likable person in the world, but if you're so bad at your job, other than making people like you, that you've got no money in the bank to pay paychecks, that runs dry pretty quick, right? People are like, super great guy. It's going to feel really bad to let him know I'm leaving, but I'm leaving, right? At some point, you got to make practical decisions.
Build on that. I think part of how we end up getting there is we're afraid to make hard decisions because we don't want to lose our likability, right? Sometimes you don't have to be an a-hole necessarily, but sometimes the best decision is really unpopular, right? For example, during COVID, for many companies, the best decision was laying off a third of the staff. Try to win a popularity contest on that vote, right? But it was the best decision. Painful. Again, it sucks for anybody to do it, but it's the best decision. Now think about that. If I'm sitting here going, man, if I do that, I'm going to be really unpopular. And again, this isn't just an ego thing. It's just like, hey, I'm going to lose, so much in the bank with so many people. People are going to be at lunch just, adding a lot of expletives to my name. And everything is going to suck. And I don't make that decision, right? I don't go forward because I'm afraid of again, the folks with the pitchforks at the gate. Then I've also gone the wrong direction, right? Because in that case, I'm more concerned with everybody being happy than the decision being put together, or the business being put together right. And that's actually just as fatal.
Correct. And that has a short-term gain with long-term consequences, right? Like that you're just putting up a facade at that point, keep everybody happy, pretend nothing's wrong, and then instead of letting go of a third of the staff, the entire staff gets let go. The company has to get mothballed. And COVID was such a crucible for this. And I'm sure you got the same thing. I had a lot of people calling me, employees of startup companies saying, look, you know how these things work. What happens next, right? Like they just let go of a third of our staff. Is that writing on the wall? Does that mean that I'm going to be next? Is this just a matter of time? And I said, well, I don't know. And he's like, but here's what I can tell you. They didn't let go of a third of the staff because it was fun. They didn't let go of a third of the staff because, oh boy, that'll pad bottom line. They let go of a third of the staff to make sure that the other 2/3 could maintain their paychecks, keep the company going, and hopefully be able to then rehire that other third at some point, right? This was the decision that was made, right? They're bailing water, right? You can't just sit and take it on until you sink. And so I said, does this mean that you're not going to be in the next round of layoffs? I have no way of knowing that. It's like, but this isn't necessarily just, oh, well, a third of the people were let go. That's the canary in the coal mine. Eventually the entire company's going under. No, these are the decisions that get made so that the company doesn't go under. Likable? No. Necessary? Yeah.
But hold on. But you said something within that I think is really important. It was how it was delivered. Because if we're trying to, look at both ends of the spectrum, the jerk that's unliked or the most popular person that doesn't get the job done, and really the spectrum doesn't exactly work like that. It's more quadrants, but whatever. At its core, what you just said is it's about being a good human. A good human is the kind of person that can make hard decisions while still caring about how people feel, right? Being thoughtful in how they present that. Right? Be able to allow their own vulnerability to show through to say, hey, look, I have to let you go. Or I can't promote you, or, whatever these types of decisions are. But here's how I arrived at that decision. Here's what concerns me. Here's, it's just being a good human, like being open with how you feel and being empathetic with how other people feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I can tell you, actually, it's a great point. And I would say, I could probably put it at 100% of those calls that I had and the discussions that I had with these folks, that it mapped back to a lack of transparency, right? It was like a third of the staff is gone, but there was no context. There was no discussion of how this impacts the trajectory of the company. Here's why we did this. At best they gave them, we had to cut those costs because we couldn't sustain them. Okay, well, great, but what does that mean, right? So, and what does that mean to me, right? And I have no idea how they communicated with the people that were let go, but I can tell you that the communication was definitely subpar in all of these cases. Otherwise, people wouldn't have been calling me, right? Somebody who's completely removed from the situation, right? So what they were looking for, to your point, was a good human who they felt like could give them some understanding of the situation, right? Which absolutely should have come from their leadership. All right. Now, why didn't their leadership do this? Maybe they were afraid to have the conversations. Maybe they didn't take the time to do it. There's a lot of reasons why it might not have happened. Could have been the likability factor, right? Like, I'd just rather not tell you why we had to do this because it was an unpopular decision. So I'm just going to avoid the conversation around it. Right? That, I would say, almost always a mistake. Right? You can't just leave things unsaid. Have to have that communication, have to have that transparency, have that vulnerability. I've had days like that where, I've had to have conversations with 6, 7, 8, 10 people, and nobody walked out of the room happy. But I made sure that they all walked out of the room informed I made sure they understood how I felt. I made sure that they understood that I wanted to know how they felt. I didn't always get that. I wasn't always given that opportunity, right? And that would have been, it was their privilege, right, to tell me how they felt or not. You can sort of gauge, right? But the important thing there was being human in that moment, delivering whatever the news, whatever the outcome was that was unpopular, that led to me being liked less in that day. But it was important to me that everybody that walked out that door was treated like a human by a human. And I think that goes so far in terms of, again, you may not maintain likability in that moment. It's not a popularity contest, as you've said several times, but at least it leaves the door open for humanity and maybe a return to likability, right? They may not like that decision. Also doesn't mean they're going to hate you forever. You brought up a really great point a couple weeks ago in another episode when we were talking about failure and that it's about severity and duration, right? So what is the severity of this decision that I'm making in terms of how it impacts this person, and what's the duration, right? Very, very few things in startups are forever, including startups themselves, sadly. But I think that those are two things that we need to constantly remind ourselves that, there is a severity of this decision, right? No, you're not getting the full raise you want versus I'm cutting your pay, right? Severity on those two things are very different, but we'll revisit this next year, or we'll revisit this in 3 months, right? There's your severity and your window of duration in terms of when can I repair this? When can I regain some of that likability? When can I repair this relationship a little bit?
A big part of it for managers, founders, what have you that are getting into this is that as the organization grows, you have more and more people that aren't connected directly to you, right? Reports of reports. And so the moment that happens, the moment you're 1 degree away from someone, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, it doesn't matter, your stock plummets, right? Because every decision someone doesn't agree with,
Yep.
there is nameless, faceless, amorphous management that made that decision. And in the history of anybody using the word management, it's never been followed up with how awesome they are, right? It's like when people talk about the government, right?
Right.
They never follow that up with how awesome the government is, right? And what that always means is the moment they use them and they and these connectors that basically say I don't know who that person is, you're screwed. And that's inherent in the organization getting bigger. It's also inherent in how you divide the organization. The less flat the organization gets, the more points you lose because fundamentally, people don't know who you are. They just heard that Ryan and Wil had to make cuts, and they're 2 or 3 legs down the org chart, and they just lost their job. There's no version where they see the humanity or the reason or the thinking or anything else like that. They just heard job lost, came back to those guys. Those guys are a-holes. And I think when we're thinking through that as founders, as managers, when we're thinking through how this organization is going to grow, right? When we start to think through, hey, as this thing gets bigger, I'm going to have fewer and fewer opportunities to create goodwill and fundamentally to be liked. But ultimately, I have to make sure that as decisions come across that may be unpopular, that my humanity comes through so that I'm also not this cardboard villain. And I think once I get painted as the cardboard villain that, things are going wrong and this person has no humanity, the Mark Zuckerberg, kind of effigy, it goes south very fast because at that point, nothing you do buys any sort of goodwill, right? And it just compounds once again.
Yeah. After the fact, very little you can do. I think there's a number of things you can do to seed some goodwill. One of those being opening yourself up for those conversations, right? You might be 2 or 3 degrees removed from that individual, but I think having open and honest conversations with your management and saying like, look, I want you to own the good outcomes that you create. There are going to be times where you're forced into making decisions that are going to be unpopular. Involve me in those. Involve me in the decision. Involve me in the communication. Let me deliver some of that message. Doesn't mean that you're taking the full brunt of it. You're taking full responsibility for the decision, because managers do need to own their own decisions. They need to own their weight of the organization. But I think that you're building goodwill with your management team at that point, and you're maintaining some goodwill with the person who's on the wrong end of that decision. Let's just stick with HR. It's somebody had to get fired. Not only are you maintaining you're probably not maintaining a ton of goodwill with that person, but everybody else who's at that same level in the organization will appreciate the fact that you came down off the pedestal and had the conversation personally with that person. And we've done this before, right? And it's not just the person who's being let go that needs that conversation. It was the 3 people that they sat next to. It's the 4, 5 people that they went to lunch with. And by the way, we'll still go to lunch with even after they're not in the organization. And guess what still happens? They still complain about you, right? Like, maybe even more so at this point, right?
No getting around that. Yeah. Um, it and so look, man, can we lead without being liked? And that's kind of where we started with this. And I think the answer is yes, but right? Yes, we can lead without being liked. We have to be respected. Like that's that at its core. But I think we have to look at likability as something we don't want to totally lose sight of. Hey, the organization's growing, everybody's stock price is going up, so who cares what they think about me? I think is a recipe for disaster too. Because as soon as you lose the humanity, and I think at its core, that's what we're talking about. Maintaining the humanity, letting people understand that you're vulnerable, letting people understand that you care, right? These aren't just decisions being made in a vacuum. Giving people the blueprint for how you got to your decisions so they can understand, maybe they don't agree with it, but they can understand how you got there, I think is fundamentally the responsibility, not only of the founder, but the entire managing team.